and fix it.
We'll catch you back here on Monday. Thanks for watching The Hill. Leland is up next.
Have a great show, buddy.
See you.
Tonight, she did it. A senator and Supreme Court justice facing scandal blame their wives. What happened to leaders taking responsibility? The spoiler.
So Republicans, get it out of your mind that you're going to vote for this guy because he's conservative.
New reasons to take RFK both literally and seriously. Why the media underestimates his chances. And sold out. The NFL shop runs out of Harrison Butker's jersey. How his traditional values speech highlighted America's cultural divide.
I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
First, this Friday evening, 4 criminal charges, including a felony and 6 birdies. That describes the day of the world's top-ranked golfer, Scottie Scheffler. 6 birdies, little under what he normally does. 4 criminal charges is something that no one had on their bingo card. Scottie Scheffler's mugshot shows us everything that is wrong with policing in America. And it should make your blood boil. Not because Louisville police arrested the world's #1 golfer on very dubious grounds, but because what happened to Scottie Scheffler, a worldwide celebrity, happens all the time, day in, day out, to black Americans, and little, if anything, is ever done to correct the injustice. Let's very quickly lay out the facts, and the facts are important. Scheffler drove to the course early this morning. Organizers told players they could drive around any traffic. Scheffler was there in a car with credentials. Police were directing traffic around an accident. Scheffler was told by one police officer to drive over a median. He kept driving for about 10 feet when another police officer in a yellow high-visibility jacket allegedly yelled at him and told him to stop. He didn't because he had been told to keep going. There was no criminal intent. This is video from right after the incident. Scheffler had no idea that he was disobeying a lawful order or somehow getting afoul of the law. Detective Brian Gills of Louisville PD was wet, cold at 5 a.m. in the rain, and at one point jumped onto Scheffler's car as if he were a bank robbery suspect to stop the PGA's #1 tour from getting to the course. Scheffler ended up in handcuffs, was charged with felony assault on a police officer. There he is being perp-walked. Scheffler is universally known as one of the kindest and most gentlemanly pro athletes in modern times. The video shows him completely cooperative and respectful. There is every reason to believe that this was one giant misunderstanding. In fact, in his post-round media availability, he did make it to the tee on time. He thanks the jailers who ended up having him have him put an orange jumpsuit on.
The officer that took me to the jail was very kind. He was great. We had a nice chat in the car that kind of helped calm me down. And I was sitting there waiting to kind of go in. I asked him, I was like, "Hey, excuse me, can you just come hang out with me for a few minutes so I can calm down?"
Only Scottie Scheffler. But the police still charged him with a felony. The detective, the guy who jumped on the car, overwrote the police report, adding some very odd language. Detective Gill's uniform pants, valued at approximately $80, were damaged beyond repair. Detective Gill suffered pain and swelling and abrasions to his left wrist and knee. Well, maybe if he hadn't jumped on the car, that wouldn't have happened. And of course, Detective Gills decided to go to the hospital for further medical treatment just to make sure they got the felony and justified the arrest. His left wrist got scraped up. Just look at the scene. A lot of officers there, a sergeant or lieutenant, could have easily intervened and made both men shake hands and just moved on. I could keep going, of course, but what was a simple misunderstanding ended up with an otherwise thoroughly decent guy charged with a felony. And now every golfer in America is livid at the Louisville police and overzealous cops. As soon as I saw the news this morning, I thought, wow, instantly. Scottie Scheffler arrested, I thought, wow. Some cop on a power trip shows Scottie Scheffler who is boss. And Louisville PD has some serious problems. A Department of Justice investigation into them accuses the Department of unlawful stops, searches, says it detains and arrests people during street enforcement activities unlawfully, including traffic and pedestrian stops. So this is something they do. Imagine that. This scenario plays out every day, every hour, every minute for black Americans. And the owner of Valhalla Golf Club doesn't go pick them up in his Range Rover because said person was let out of jail just 2 hours after the arrest.
This is Scotty Scheffler. He is in that Range Rover, the first of the two cars that you see pulling up that road. This Scotty Scheffler arriving at Valhalla Golf Club just minutes ago after he was arrested, processed, and released this morning, charged with 1 felony count and 3 misdemeanors after an incident that took place outside the entrance gates to the club.
So yeah, we should all be angry. But you can't be angry at the overzealous cops who arrested Scotty Scheffler without being angry at the overzealous cops who do much the same thing and worse to hundreds, if not thousands, of people every day. Daquan Bruce is here, Executive Director of Concerned Communities for America. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Can we finally have an honest conversation about what's wrong with policing in America, you think?
Absolutely. And I actually hope that this situation, albeit a misunderstanding, I hope that it awakens the need to have a real discussion about how black and brown Americans, often young black men who are well-meaning, oftentimes not doing anything with criminal intent, have them find themselves in similar situations, but the end result is never the same as this.
They don't get picked up after 2 hours.
Exactly.
Look, and, thank God for videotapes at times. And I think you got to separate, right? There is so many officers who do the right thing, who are out there just trying hard to protect folks who've been demonized. You got some officers, probably like the detective here, who got a little jumpy and everybody coalesces around. You got police departments like Louisville who have some real issues. But then at the same time, the answer to that from so many on the left has been, well, we're going to defund the police. We are going to let real criminals out of jail without having to post bond or without being prosecuted, and we're going to let people with guns run amok on the streets. Does that work either?
Not at all. Not at all. For this situation to really shed light on the conversation, the larger conversation of what's happening around police training and police norms, you have to look at how you solve this issue from a matter of upholding law and order, not just because, one officer's done something wrong. We start to kind of, attribute this to a larger conspiracy, and use all forms of malfeasance to kind of remedy that. But what we need to be doing is looking at this and saying, hey, we know there is a fact that there is something wrong with the police force in Kentucky. And we know that DOJ is looking into all other matters of police forces. Let's solve those specific issues. Let's not attribute this one thing or this type of issue to all other scenarios. Let's keep them case by case, and let's solve them based upon the merits of the case and the facts of the case, not just because, we think that,
Well, Louisville's got problems, right? Videos showed Louisville police officers, their elite, one of their units, anti-crime units, tossing drinks on unsuspecting pedestrians. It was called Slushy Gate. They were a part of a police unit built to target drug dealers, ended up engaging in a series of juvenile pranks that further eroded public trust. Look, it's hard to fire officers. There's all sorts of things protecting them, on and on and on. That said, the answer that we kept hearing was defund the police, and we still hear that. I'm wondering if you didn't double the salaries of police officers, you'd start actually being able to attract a lot higher quality folks to the police force.
Most definitely. Police are definitely underpaid for the work that they have to do.
So why is that so hard to say? Why is it so hard to say we need to clean up the police and we need to pay them more?
Well, it depends on where you are, one.
Okay.
And it also is hard to say because of the prevailing narrative that we see out in the media and out in the streets and the communities. When you talk to people who are living in places that need adequate police force, the one thing that they say is that we need more police. We need better police. But when you talk to people who, come from these, universities and education systems and, more affluent neighborhoods who look down with a sort of a savior complex, they say that the police are the problem and that you need to take them away so that people can have better lives. But that has never been the case for the people who are experiencing these injustices themselves. They want police. They want better police. And the way that that you do that is you make it so that the conditions in which the police are working under, that their needs are met and that they are part of their community. We need to start looking at police and civilian relationships as cohesive, not mutually exclusive, not you have to have one or the other, but we are a part of the community and we work together to keep our community safe.
I'm wondering, just as you saw him, and you saw, obviously this video came out early this morning. You saw it. You're a guy who follows the news. What'd you think? What was sort of the emotional reaction?
Well, the first thing I thought about was the situation that caused a traffic jam. And I thought, based upon the reporting at that time, that, Scotty Scheffler was involved in what
right in the accident, yeah.
Right, in the accident. And then when we later was able to separate the two, my heart went out to the gentleman who lost his life and his family. But then I started to think about, from an area of, for lack of a better term, privilege, this is a sporting event, a major sporting event that's going on. There are, tons of, people out there from the media, from
yeah, and if it can happen there to Scotty Scheffler, to
anywhere,
anywhere
to anybody, and we got to be aware of that.
Yeah, for sure. No, we really do. Otherwise, this is wasted. Daquan, it's good to see you. You're the right man to talk to about this. Thank you. The left, literally, and we say that not only the left but the media, went nuts about an NFL star stating his beliefs in traditional values, while Diddy gets the key to New York City, the shocking new tape showing the utter hypocrisy of people who say they stand up for all women. And I'm going to just go out on a limb here. This guy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., will not become the next president of the United States. But that's not the whole story. The new polling showing he will 100% determine the outcome of the election. There's a line out there, money talks, cow manure walks. Well, Harrison Butker's $129 jersey on the NFL shop is sold out in women's sizes. His male jersey is now one of the most popular jerseys on the NFL shop's website. Butker, as you might know, is a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he recently delivered a commencement address at a Catholic college.
Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother.
So he gave a speech about women in traditional roles, and women bought so many of his NFL jerseys, they sold out. Yet much of the D.C. and New York media still can't wrap their head around Butker's speech. They are somehow triggered by it. Not that he told other women to do this, but that he celebrated his wife. Here's CNN's Jim Acosta.
I mean, it's unbelievable what Butker was saying in this speech, saying that women might be better off staying at home instead of pursuing careers. It's 2024.
Yeah, I mean,
that's insane.
Evidently, it's not that insane to all the women buying his jersey. They don't think it's insane. They actually appreciate it. Acosta, like so many of his friends in the D.C. and New York media, look down on traditional value Americans like Butker, like his wife. Yet they idolize the rapper P. Diddy. CNN obtained video of Diddy savagely beating his then-girlfriend in 2016. This video came out a couple of hours ago. Diddy ran after her in a hotel with a towel around her, chased her down the corridor, and beat her viciously, which honestly should surprise absolutely no one, including all of the celebrities and all of the members of the media who used to go to his parties and talk about how much they liked him and laughed with him. All you had to do to know that P. Diddy was capable of this and likely engaged in this kind of behavior is listen to some of his lyrics.
Sex in the Porsche, your legs like the Tesla doors. I need a naked, wipe me down. Super wet, super nasty.
Those are the lyrics we can play. My mother's watching. Almost all of Diddy's lyrics are far too profane. Yet for decades, the same people who partied with Diddy, the same people who explained away lyrics about beating women, are the same people who now trash Harrison Butker for celebrating women who choose to stay home with their kids. Batya Sargon is here, opinion editor for Newsweek, author of Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. I'm wondering if I'm being fair in drawing the comparison between the P. Diddy crowd and the Butker crowd.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on the fairest show on television, Leland. It's great to be here with you and your viewers. The first point I'll make is we don't know that women are buying those shirts, right? We know that the women's sizes have sold out, right? It's totally possible.
Fair enough.
Have bought this shirt for their wives. To me, the outrage that's been generated around his speech and the culture war that's developing, right, where the right is defending him and the left is attacking him for suggesting that women not work or that women, see their true vocation as being wives and mothers, sort of is a smokescreen for the economic reality in which many women would love to stay home and raise their children, would love to work part-time and focus on their families, but it is not economically viable in the economy that was created by a handshake agreement between right and left. And so to me, this kind of outrage machine, both the outrage on the left and the defense on the right, is simply a way of us still not talking about the fact that you can no longer afford to sustain a family on a single income. Although, of course, for Butker, that's not a problem. He's very wealthy.
Right. And I guess the extension to that, right, is that in the 1960s, the 1970s, certainly in the 1950s, it was very possible to have a middle-class family with a male breadwinner and a wife who stayed home. That's sort of, the way the world worked back then. Good points that left and right agreed to basically eliminate that economy, and neither side media, if you will, or side-taking media wants to call that out. But what I can't figure out is the intellectual dishonesty, right? And maybe that's just there's no shame in the hypocrisy, but of Butker being so terrible in people's eyes and shaming him for not telling all women to stay home, but saying if women want to stay home, they should be celebrated, fine. And then at the same time, this same media is the one who celebrated and defended P. Diddy, who objectified women and degraded women and belittled women, and now we know beat women in a way that was far, far worse than anything Butker ever said or did.
And the actual parallel is even starker, Leland, because the second half of Butker's speech, he said, I have a message now for the young men out there. Be fathers, be engaged, be in your home, take care of your children, take pride in your masculinity, and take pride in fatherhood. And of course, we know that children being born out of wedlock is a scourge on lower income Americans, especially Black Americans, but it's spreading to all lower income Americans. So that was a really important piece of the puzzle. And I think that there on the left, you really have a point, because they refuse to talk about this issue, the breakdown of the Black family, the fact that there is so much dysfunction, which is now spreading and is a real problem, because the number one predictor for downward mobility for children is not having a father in the home. And so he really did speak that language, and that is something the left will never talk about.
Look, it's also the number one indicator of downward mobility, but also of going to jail in terms of whether you come from a broken family or a household in a family with two parents in the home. But why among this very same crowd, Acosta and the rest of his crew, is there, until a video comes out, the video of Diddy beating his girlfriend, why is it that they are allowed to say the most vile, misogynistic, awful things in rap lyrics, and not only is it defended, but it's celebrated by these people?
It's a really good question. I mean, they have to define that cultural elite, because they've really thrown their lot in there with them. And again, I always see things in terms of like the marketplace and the market forces. And rich people are Democrats now, they're liberals, and, the media, the music industry, Hollywood, all of our cultural elites are very much embracing those leftist values. And there's this kind of circling the wagons where they cannot imagine that one of their own would have been engaged in exactly what all of their music was telling us they were engaged in.
Yeah, it was Maya Angelou who said, when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. So there you go. It's good to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy a restful day, and we'll talk soon. Yeah. CNN, MSNBC, and the Biden campaign are now suddenly obsessed with Black voters. What will Black voters do? Here's a crazy idea. What if Black voters are just like every other voter?
This lead is south of 40 percentage points. This is historic.
Live pictures of the Minnesota GOP Lincoln-Reagan dinner in St. Paul, Minnesota. Former President Trump's expected to take the stage there in about an hour, just hours after announcing he has accepted a fourth debate offer. You can expect to hear a lot tonight about the debates, especially Trump continuing to challenge Biden to more debates. President Biden's only agreed to 2. You can also hear a lot about African Americans, a group Mr. Trump is surging with, in particular, young African Americans.
Donald Trump is pulling 25% of that vote. Joe Biden is at just 62% of this vote. This lead, Sarah, is south of 40 percentage points. This is historic.
Team Biden knows there is a problem. They just don't know what to do about it. Sunday, he'll speak at the Morehouse College commencement before headlining an NAACP dinner in Detroit. Earlier today, he met with leaders of the Divine Nine historically black sororities and fraternities. Before that, he spoke at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. He said there, "My name is Joe Biden, and I'm a lifetime member of the NAACP." With us now, Scott Tranter, head of data science at Decision Desk HQ, Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist, LA Times contributor, former House GOP Oversight Committee advisor, also a NewsNation contributor. Scott, you got to get a longer.
I know, I got to get more adjectives.
Come on. Okay, we start with the guy with the longer resume. Is there something to be said that the old paradigm of looking at voters by race may be a mistake the Democrats are making, and they should be looking at them by class?
Yeah, because ultimately, and Scott's data points this out all the time, people make decisions based on their pocketbooks more than any other type of variable. So no matter what race, culture, creed you have, you vote by what's going on in your own bank account and what's going on in your own family, what's going on in your own backyard. That's how Democrats should be looking at this, because when they try the one-size-fits-all thing when it comes to other cultures and other races, they end up alienating a lot of people. That's why that at times they have trouble with the Hispanic community, because what works for the black community may not work for the Hispanic community, which may not work for the AAPI community.
We look at the polling across the battleground. Biden is losing to Trump among working class voters by 16 points. Arizona down 9, Georgia down 21, Michigan down 24 working class voters, huge African-American population in Michigan. Nevada, huge Hispanic population, same thing. Pennsylvania down 19 points. Wisconsin, with less of a working class minority population, only down 6 points. Scott, does barnstorming from historically black college to NAACP dinner to the Smithsonian Museum on African American History change anything?
Probably not at the top line. I think your undertone there is it's working class. It's not so much the ethnicity of them, it's their income level, right? We know from the polling that Donald Trump does better among the working class voters, and it's simple. There are just more working class voters than there are upper middle class or certainly upper class voters, no matter what their race is.
Does the working class divide also speak to culture?
I think it can, sure. But again, I think like Scott says, ultimately, there is the pocket of voters where there is the most constituency is anyone that's not upper class, anything beneath that. And that's where Democrats, listen, if we have a good economy.
America, to be fair, America isn't 50-50 working class and upper class, right, Scott? But yet Joe Biden and Donald Trump nationwide are effectively tied. So what are the other constituencies there?
Well, obviously you can do it socioeconomic, but you can do it on issue as well. To your point, they're tied 50-50. That stat you showed up, it's not that Joe Biden is losing African Americans. It's just that he's losing more of them than they've done historically in the past. When you have razor-thin margins, all Donald Trump has to do is get 10% more of the African American vote, and he wins Michigan. He wins Wisconsin. So he doesn't need to win the whole section. He just needs to peel off some.
So you say that the issue of talking about racial issues does not trump, no pun intended, the economic issues. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan talked about the inflation issue coming up in the next 6 months or so. Take a listen.
I think the underlying inflation may not go away the way people expect it to. And I look at the future, like a lot of things we look at are kind of inflationary. The green economy, the remilitarization of the world, the infrastructure requirements. All
right, and these are just numbers. Under the Biden presidency, grocery prices up nearly 1/3, gas up 50%. The average American, it cost them $12,000 more to maintain the same living standards as before Biden took office. Scott, 6 months, how do you turn that around?
You don't. Look, you and I have been talking, I think you and I, for the last 2 years, every segment we talk about inflation. The stat right there, $12,000 more. When the average home median income is around $80,000, it's an extra $1,000 a month they're spending on stuff that they think they have to buy. And they do have to buy milk, bread, all that kind of stuff. You can't turn that around unless you can slash basic staples by 30, 40%.
Car insurance isn't going to all of a sudden start coming out. We want to put those live pictures of Minnesota back up, which I think is interesting, Kurt, because President Trump is otherwise occupied during the week right now. He's got somewhere he's got to be in New York. Where you choose to go is important. And Joe Biden's in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a swing state. And Donald Trump is in a state that should be safely blue. It shouldn't even be on the Republican map. The fact that he's there may not mean that he wins, but does it force Democrats to start playing defense in more places?
I don't think it does. I think in this case, Minnesota is to Republicans what Florida is to the Democrats. They keep chasing these states. They're not going to go back. It's not going to go to red, just like Florida's not going to go to blue. But ultimately, too, I think one of the key things here, and for all that we talk about the economy, we say this, too. Never underestimate the Republicans' ability to blow it. It would be great if Republicans spent all of their time talking about inflation and the economy, but instead they do things...
You mean it would be great for Republicans?
Great for Republicans and their chances to win, but instead they do things like Katie Britt introducing legislation to create some sort of national pregnancy database. It's like, why would you do that? If the election is about inflation and the economy, Republicans win.
Yeah, what it's about. Good to see you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Congrats on the new hardware right there. He's now a married man. We see it. Israeli Defense Forces have brought home 3 bodies of hostages from Gaza. They say 56-year-old Eitan Glenn Renter, 22-year-old Shani Luke, 28-year-old Ami Buscala were all killed on October 7th during the attacks. Luke was last seen alive at the Nova Music Festival dancing. That's her on the right. That's also her on the left as her mangled body was paraded through Gaza, met by cheering crowds. She was confirmed dead in late October when they found a large piece of her skull. Buscala was on the phone with her uncle as she was trying to hide in between cars. He said he heard her scream, "No, no, no," and then the gunshots. Glenn Renter leaves behind 4 children, 2 grandchildren. He arrived at the festival just a few hours before the attack. As we head into the weekend, it's worth remembering Hamas holds 125 hostages, including 5 Americans. They're underground inside Gaza. They've been starved, tortured, and likely raped for 224 days. Mia Schwarzenberg is with us, expert in humanitarian campaigns, former television journalist for 25 years, reported from Iraq and Afghanistan. Mia, I'm glad to have you with us. Is there a way, somehow, to get the story of the hostages back in the news?
Oh, hi, Leland, and hi, everyone. I will say like this. This was a very sad day, as you can imagine, in Israel and probably in the Jewish communities, because it was, we expected that tragedies like this will happen. We know from different sources, we know from intelligence that some of the hostages might be dead and we're going to recover just bodies. But when it really happens, it breaks not only everyone's heart, but it breaks that nation's heart. It's tough to talk about it, but we'll never give up. Your question was, how do we bring this again on the news? I would say forget the news. I would prefer to forget about the big media outlets who were never very, never in a hurry to talk about hostages. I would try to put these stories in everyone's heart, if it's possible, in everyone's social media. I would try to make people talk about it, to make people stop torn their posters, especially in America. I have to say it, for some reason, they had this displeasure to torn the hostages of the...
You think about what the Prime Minister of Israel has said about this. Heartbroken for the great loss. My wife Sarah and I agree with the families. We will return all of our abductees, the dead and the void alike. I wonder if he meant alive. I think that was a Hebrew translation by Google that didn't quite work. I congratulate our brave forces who, with determined action, returned boys and girls to their homeland. You think about that comment. You also realize that the Israelis left for a long time We're getting some feedback on, I think, your microphone. But the Israelis waited outside Rafah, where these 3 hostages' bodies were found, for weeks, maybe months, because of pressure by President Biden on Prime Minister Netanyahu. At what point do we have to acknowledge that both men, both Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu, are making a lot of decisions based on their own political self-interest and not on the interests of what we just talked about, which is getting the 125 or so Israelis and 5 Americans home as soon as possible?
Look, I'm going to tell you how it looks from Europe looking to America. I'm not a voter. I don't care really about what's going on, but I care about everything which has a connection to our hostages and to what happens in Israel. So I would say that, to me, the insistence of President Biden to not let the IDF go into Rafah was very suspicious. All his changes of moods, almost like a woman at a certain age, and I'm talking about Mr. Biden, of his one day he's completely the Israel ally, next day he's against, don't do this, don't do that. To me, that was a very cheap show, if you want. To me, it looks like he really cares just about his political situation there, and very, very little about American hostages or about hostages in general. But I would say, from my perspective, that what Netanyahu is doing, it's not necessarily connected to politics. I think it's more connected to what's really important right now: the hostages, the destruction of Hamas.
What Netanyahu's doing may be more connected to his own political survival, I guess. Inside Israel, I think you make a great point in terms of President Biden, that we just don't hear from the American president about American hostages. I don't remember the last time he mentioned their names. Mia, thank you very much. We appreciate the time.
He had an entire interview at CNN very short while ago, and he was talking about everything in the important to him, but not a single word about the hostages, not even the American hostages. And this is something I cannot forget, if you want, about President Biden.
I think there's a lot of people who can't forget it either, and who are quite angry about it. Mia, thank you.
I don't think he really cares about hostages. I think he cares about, you were just talking about in Minnesota, I think he really cares about the political gain here and there.
Mia is a TV journalist. She'll understand better than most. We got to run. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Joe Biden wants RFK Jr. nowhere near the debate stage. RFK Jr., in terms of speaking about Israel, is pretty vocal. Donald Trump, well, he goes back and forth on RFK. Why are both camps so afraid of a candidate with views so far from the mainstream? In Minnesota, Colorado is one of many states in which Kennedy is trying to get on the ballot. You can see he's already on the ballot in Texas and California, but those 2 states don't add up to the 270 electoral votes needed to get on the CNN debate stage next month. Also on the ballot in Michigan, Utah, and Nevada. New York Times poll shows that RFK takes away way more votes from Biden than he does Trump in almost every swing state. So it's no surprise that President Biden doesn't want him on the debate stage. Our favorite friend David Drucker of The Dispatch will be at the Denver rally and joins us now. Is at all the media, and maybe I would even include NewsNation in this, are we underreporting or underemphasizing the significance not of RFK's possibility to win, but his possibility to swing the election?
Well, we might be, and I think that's natural. I think one of the things we're trying to do at the Dispatch is not underestimate the prospects that RFK Jr. could have an impact on the race. It's why I'm headed to Denver on Sunday to check him out, cover his rally. I think, though, one of the reasons why we might be underplaying him so far is he's simply not on the ballot in many states. And you can't play spoiler if you're not on the ballot. And you have to be on the ballot, as you know, Leland, in the right states to impact the states that are going to decide the election.
All right, so are you voting for Robert Kennedy or against other candidates? It's not 50-50, but it's 60-40. For RFK against the other candidates is always above 40%. In Pennsylvania, it's 53%. And when you listen to RFK, he sort of has this pitch to people who don't like either Trump or Biden. He says the polarization now in America is worse than the Civil War. Take a listen.
the polarization between Americans. That, you know, both of them say they don't like the division and they blame it on the other guy. But it's more toxic now than at any time since the American Civil War. It's being amplified by the algorithms and the social media sites, and it is going to destroy our country if we don't figure out a way to bridge the divide and get people to see themselves as Americans again. President Trump and President Biden cannot do that.
Okay, and RFK Jr. can get us all to see each other as Americans again?
Well, he'll have to prove that he can. I mean, right now there's no indication that he's the guy to do this. He holds very heterodox views on a number of issues. And
David, I have no idea what heterodox means. I'm guessing what you're meaning is controversial?
It's sort of out-of-the-box views, right? I mean, I think most Americans think the measles vaccine is a good thing. I mean, RFK Jr. over the years has been opposed to most vaccines. He talks about things like the war machine and, you know, look, Americans may believe you need more defense spending or less. I don't think most people believe there's some secret cabal that's a war machine. And so even though Joe Biden and Donald Trump in particular are so polarizing, they are talking about the bread and butter issues most Americans care about the most. RFK Jr. is not. And so one of the things he has to do is, number one, give Americans confidence that he could actually function effectively as president, and then talk to them where they are and not just talk to the kinds of low propensity voters that don't tend to vote that often, who care more about these issues that are important to them but not important to a majority of Americans, at least when you rank them on a priority list.
So what I'm hearing you say is you got to go out and you've got to give people a reason to vote for you other than the assassination of JFK, mass shootings and antidepressants, the 2004 presidential election was stolen, these sort of very out-of-the-box ideas. You got to talk about inflation, the economy, and the border.
That and keeping America safe in the world and projecting American power and trying to calm all of these issues that we have raging around the globe. I think you hit it, Leland, and I just added an extra one. And that's all you should be talking about. You need to meet voters where they are.
All right. Well, you have the distinct duty of going to see the voters where they are and see if RFK's message is resonating with them. In Trump's shadow, the battle for 2024 and the future of the GOP was David's book. Now we are into Trump's perhaps last race that you will be covering. Good to see you, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Leland.
Yeah. Senator Bob Menendez has a novel defense in his bribery case. He's blaming his wife. That's the wife that's also been diagnosed with cancer. And he's not the only one to use the spouse excuse. Whatever happened to men vowing to protect their wives in good times and bad, in sickness and in health? Leadership. That's next. Two of America's most powerful men from opposite parties have something in common. They figured out how to defend the indefensible in perhaps the worst way possible. They blamed their wives. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito blamed his wife for flying the American flag upside down outside their house after the January 6 riots. The New York Times obtained a photo of the flag upside down, which is the same symbol used by the rioters. Alito's statement to the New York Times: "I had no involvement whatsoever in flying the flag." It was briefly replaced by Mrs. Alito in response to a neighbor's use of objectionable and personally insulting language on yard signs. Senator Bob Menendez blamed his wife for stashing gold bars shortly before he told the world she had an aggressive form of breast cancer. He's charged with a whole host of bribery charges. He allegedly took gold bars and fancy cars in exchange for political favors. And now that he could spend the rest of his life in prison, he blames his wife. Here is The Daily Show.
So Bob Menendez's argument is that his wife was secretly orchestrating a corrupt international bribery scheme and hoarding gold bars in his own house, and he never knew it. And that, gentlemen, is why you need to ask your wife about her day. Okay? Ask your wife about her day.
Good advice going into the weekend. Very good advice. We wrote about this first in War Notes. That's our daily newsletter. Comes out every day at 4 p.m. Eastern. It's actually moved to 4:05, but you can still respond to it. Respond to the email. We read every one. Also talk to us on social media at Leland Vittert on Twitter and Instagram. Subscribe for free. And we're going to leave you with some of your thoughts to end the week. LM writes to War Notes, I'm going to be so mad if LV doesn't have the sketch artist lady draw his wedding, and even madder if he doesn't show us the drawings. LM, I will discuss your request with the boss, that being my fiance. I'm learning, and I do ask her how her day's been every day. Good point there. We've heard from a lot of you about our interview with courtroom sketch artist Elizabeth Williams. She's brought to life some of the best moments for us, and you are right. She is remarkably talented. Darla writes to us on Twitter at Leland Vittert. I will guarantee POTUS will receive the debate questions prior to the debate. That's how he's going to prepare. I'm not going to impugn the integrity of the moderators or of the networks hosting the debates, but we're at a point where a lot of people believe this way. They think that Darla's right, that the networks are really in the bag for one side. It says everything about the lack of trust in us journalists. We should work harder to earn it back. Bill writes to War Notes, why are these Republican lawmakers wasting taxpayers' dollars going to Trump's trial? Don't they have better things to do, like securing the border and the fentanyl crisis? Not to mention the overall inflation rate and how it's affecting the American people. That is a great question, Bill, and an excellent point. And here is the answer very simply. Actually getting things done here in Washington, that requires compromise. It's making the sausage. Compromise is now a dirty word, and it doesn't get you on TV as much, nor does it get you a shot at being in Donald Trump's cabinet. And that's why it's so important for us to call it out when it happens on both sides. Mel, debates are a farce. Moderators put both hands, not just thumbs on the scale. Leave the moderators out. Mano a mano. Better yet, put them in a ring with gloves. Last man standing is president. I think the Secret Service may have something to say about that, Mel. But it would be nice if they interacted, mixed it up a bit, right? If NewsNation gets a debate, we are going to push for just that, for you, the viewers, to really see these two men interact. I'm going to go home and ask Rachel how her day was. Hope you get to spend the weekend with somebody you love. Here's Chris from New York.
Happy Friday. Go Knicks. Chris Cuomo here. Sean P. Diddy Combs has trouble. It is not a he said, she said anymore. Why? Hotel surveillance